So tourism numbers yet to fully rebound following, of course, the COVID lockdown, the extensive COVID lockdowns in New Zealand. And what hasn't helped, of course, is the international slowdown, the economic collapse, of course. But tourism numbers in some other countries are doing okay. But here in New Zealand, we never fully recovered. And in some parts of our tourism sector, it's been a real struggle. Many say our strategy isn't right and we're losing out to other countries. What do the numbers tell us? What needs to happen? Brad Olsen is with Informetrics and he joins us now. G'day, Brad. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Yeah, this just paints a real picture, doesn't it? Because we were doing so well, especially in some of the Chinese market and that sort of thing. We were everyone was pouring into New Zealand pre-COVID, weren't they?
Well, yeah, we did have a really strong tourism offering, and I think we've still got one now. It's hard, right? The rest of the world has gone through this big inflationary hit. They've gone through this big level of interest rate increases. Funnily enough, when they're looking out at their spending, travel is not the biggest thing on their priority list. And when they are travelling, they're probably a little bit more budget conscious than before. And of course, coming down to New Zealand has always been an expensive endeavour. So a little bit tricky, I think, given what you're seeing out there in the global economy. Still encouraging, though. I mean, New Zealand's, the number of arrivals into New Zealand of foreign tourists over the last 12 months has averaged about 83% of sort of the same time in 2019. So, I mean, that's not a bad set of recovery that we've seen come through. It's just that it has been a much slower slog the last sort of couple of almost in the last year, really, where we just haven't seen it bounce too much above that 80% mark. And I think it really does reiterate that, again, it's going to take a while for this to recover. The real challenge for tourism operators is that they could operate with lower international tourists when Kiwis were doing so much domestic travel. It's just that at the moment, of course, those higher interest rates means that us Kiwis are doing less domestic travel. Tourism internationally hasn't quite got back to normal, and so we are feeling the pinch a bit more at the moment.
Yeah, well said. Well, nice and clear, because what you did see during that COVID period was when you could travel, people did. And either side of the lockdowns, people were really getting out and about and sort of making New Zealand the destination, because that's all you could really do. So it was sort of masked. The international drop-off was masked, wasn't it? Who's not coming? Who do you think's not coming? Do the numbers tell us who's not coming?
Yeah, look, you sort of reiterated it before. I mean, it's China at the moment that still isn't coming back nearly as much. Of course, they're seeing weaker economic times in their own country. But as well as that, they have become more accustomed to doing domestic travel within China. And so, again, sort of more competition to get out and about. Interesting as well, though, if you look at the other side where we are seeing better numbers, the numbers from Australia in a pretty healthy environment, sort of at about 94% for the last month. And of course, we are still in those colder months in New Zealand. So often we're seeing a lot of people come through for skiing. So a lot of people going to Queenstown, not as many people across the rest of the country. However, it's the Americans that are really doing us well at the moment. We're seeing, numbers at or often quite above 100% of sort of pre-pandemic 2019 levels. So a lot of visitors coming in from overseas. And I think that's partly also because, of course, New Zealand's a small little nation at the bottom of the South Pacific. Airline connections are huge for us. And so the fact that you've got so many American airlines that are flying down to New Zealand, very encouraging. You're not seeing the same sort of numbers going out through to China yet. So definitely an improvement that we'll be looking for over the next year from the China and the rest of the sort of Southeast Asian market as well.
Yeah, there's a number of things that you've said there I want to unpack. That's the American market. It is a lucrative market. We like the Americans to come here. And it's a surprise, isn't it? When someone like Trump is near office or getting to office, you see this mass sort of arrival into New Zealand, or certainly inquiries about New Zealand. The American airlines that are flying into New Zealand, is it just me, or have I noticed that heaps more American airlines now include New Zealand as a destination?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. There are a lot more that are flying here. And because of that, there's a lot more competition on prices, which is great for consumers because you do have more options. You've often got more times, you've got more destinations, and you've got often a cheaper price to choose from. That seems to be a wider play by a lot of the American airlines as well, that are not only looking at New Zealand, but also to a degree Australia, but also the Pacific. And you're seeing a lot more flights sort of going through those areas. So definitely encouraging. And I think as well, I mean, if you look at the numbers, there was a real spike, funnily enough, when we held the FIFA Women's World Cup in New Zealand. There was a big sort of push coming through from the US and similar, and people that were obviously sticking around. So it's encouraging to see those international events that have been supporting activity. But I think also the US market at the moment, the US economy is still in a strong enough space. They're still spending a lot of money And so that's quite encouraging in terms of attracting people here to New Zealand.
What's our strategy like? Because depending on who you speak to, we've either got this really right or really wrong, and you can never spend enough money, trying to attract people to New Zealand. The best advertising is probably word of mouth. But Tourism New Zealand, are they in the market? Who are they targeting? Are they doing the right thing?
Oh, they're definitely in the market, and you sort of still get good recognition of New Zealand overseas, which is encouraging. Of course, the last couple of weeks there's been talk around the international tourist levy that's coming, or the increasing of that's coming through, and will that dampen demand? I mean, given the sorts of sums that you see people pay to come to New Zealand, I don't think it's as catastrophic as some make it out to be. But I think as well, and an interesting conversation that we sort of have to have and are having as a country around tourism is, if you go back to 2019, when we, before the pandemic, there were actually a lot of questions being asked about, do we have the right level of tourism? Have we got over tourism? Are we sort of, burning through our resources a bit too much, putting too much pressure on infrastructure? So I think there is still an ongoing conversation around what is sort of the right level of tourism, if you will. How do we attract some of those higher value people? How do we ensure that our infrastructure and sort of public resources are able to cope with all of these numbers of people? So there's a lot, I think, both looking out to the rest of the world of how we bring people in, but also how we make sure we've got the right structures here in New Zealand. Because, again, you sort of get to the point, and I worry we get to the point where we have such a huge focus on tourism that we actually don't protect our natural resources and our infrastructure and similar as much. So there's a delicate balance. You've got to get the economics right, but you've got to have the country on board as well.
Oh, I reckon you're right. I reckon that's bang on. And I wonder if we're 83% of pre-COVID levels, then we're almost about right. I know people will say, well, we need the money. But also, you don't want to give people a bad experience. You don't want to also make it so poor the experience that New Zealanders are also feeling it as well. Car parks and toilets and that sort of thing. I sensed for a little while there that we'd maxed out and we'd actually gone over a sort of a no return. We'd gone over this line where it actually wasn't a great experience for anyone.
Totally. And I think that's why as well, there's a lot of focus on getting tourism back to being, one of New Zealand's major exports, if not the number one export, where it was just before the pandemic. And I think that's still an aspiration we can go for, but it does have to come with the right sort of protections. And I think it's encouraging to see a lot of tourism companies that are thinking about this a lot more in terms of how they engage with the community, what sort of offerings they put out, because there has been an adjustment as well over time. People are often looking for not only a high value experience, but also sort of a socially responsible experience as well. And so looking around at what supports are given to the local community, how sustainable some of those offerings are. If New Zealand is going to trade as we do on our clean green image, we've sort of got to back that up with action on the ground, because tourists are noticing, of course, they've got a lot more competition, they've got a lot more options that they can choose across the world. So we need to be walking that talk. And I think the tourism sector is very much doing it, but we've got to keep that in mind as we continue to try and get things back to where they were before COVID.
I wonder if we're in trouble as a nation because, climate change and flying, she's not pretty. And I wonder, because of where we're located in the world, at the bottom of the earth, you need to fly to get here, if it's not that cool to come to New Zealand because you're burning carbon.
Well, potentially, although, the numbers sort of speak for themselves in terms of how much people do want to. But that also, I think, highlights why, some of those technological advancements in the aviation sector are going to be so critical for New Zealand's sort of continued success on the tourism stage. You think about, some of those planes that are coming out now that are creating fewer emissions because they are much more efficient. The focus on sustainable aviation fuel in the industry, the thought of electric planes for sort of shorter hops and similar. That's all encouraging. But again, Air New Zealand has said that one of the reasons they had to drop one of their climate commitments was because there's just not that sort of access readily to sustainable aviation fuels. They want to put it in, they want to use it. It's not there, it's not available, it's not cost effective, it's not being supported within the wider region as much. So sort of unlock and do those things right, and you start to support a lot more of the industry being able to bring this forward and grow over the long term, rather than just having a short-term hit.
You're a good man, Brad. Where's your choice of holiday, New Zealand or overseas? What do you do?
Oh, if I can, I travel a lot domestically across New Zealand, so it's always great to see the local sites, but I'm not going to lie, having been to the US again last year for a quick trip, I don't mind popping across to sort of see how the world's largest economy is going every now and then.
Exactly. I thought you might say that. Hey, good on you, mate. Always appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you so much.
Duncan Garner.